Former President Donald Trump returned to Washington, meanwhile, yesterday, and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina again was praising Trump's influence on the party.
If you think Trump is bad for the party, I disagree with you. I think President Trump is good for the party. Let me tell you why. President Trump has gotten people who wouldn't give me or Romney or anybody else the time of day. They believe that he is on their side. You know, what happened with me and Trump, Larry? Well, we found common ground. You know, I was one of the 16 guys that ran against him, and if you don't remember, it's really not your fault. It didn't last that long on my part.
I remember.
Well,
I interviewed you on another network.
Yeah, so I'm going to close with this thought. Well, what happened?
But you're moving towards redemption.
Yeah, I am. I'm trying. I'm trying to move toward a strong America, and he's the vehicle to get us there. So here's what I'm trying to do. After I lost, I took my loss. You know, he beat my brains out. Who am I to give him advice? Then we went over to the White House. We had dinner, and we started playing golf. And here's what happened. We found something in common. I've come to like him, and he likes him.
Remember, on the evening of January 6th, on the floor of the Senate, Lindsey Graham said, "Count me out. Enough is enough." Joining us now, opinion columnist at the Washington Post, Jennifer Rubin. Jen, good morning. Your latest opinion piece in the Post is titled "Liz Cheney and Larry Hogan Show What It Means to Stand Against GOP Lies." In it, Jennifer writes, a small group of Republicans has made the right choice in denouncing former President Donald Trump for his attempted coup, but too many of them have since turned around and supported election deniers in their party in the midterm elections. They should take a lesson from Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming and Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, both of whom showed over the weekend what it means to stand up for truth and democracy. Hogan joins Cheney to make a fundamental moral and political statement. Do not vote for election deniers, period. Now, where are the rest of the Republicans who will stand with Cheney and Hogan? Where are former President George W. Bush and former governors such as Mitch Daniels of Indiana or John Kasich of Ohio? Where are the current Republican officials who claim to reject MAGA delusions, such as Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson or the 7 Republican senators who voted to convict Trump at his second impeachment trial? Every one of them should follow Cheney and Hogan's lead in urging Republicans not to vote for the slew of election deniers running for critical offices that affect elections. So, Jen, Governor Hogan said over the weekend couldn't bring himself to support the nominee now in Maryland, the Republican who's seeking to take his seat, running against the Democrat Wes Moore in Maryland. But as you say, Hogan, Cheney, that small group, they are the outliers. They are the ones who have been effectively ostracized and run out of the party because they are standing up and telling the truth about what happened in the 2020 election.
That's right. They are lonely figures, and far more of the Republicans are taking the Lindsey Graham track, which is slavish obsequiousness to the former president. And it's very interesting in your last segment with Matt talking about how Democrats are trying to boost these extreme candidates. It's ironic that both Hogan and Cheney are saying these guys in our own party don't support them. And they actually named some names. Liz Cheney was asked about people like Kari Lake in Arizona and Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania. And she said, we shouldn't be supporting these people. So that's a pretty bold move. But frankly, this really is, to quote another president, a time for choosing. And Republicans have to decide, are they on the side of America or are they on the side of Trump? And as the progression of the committee's fact-finding and of the Justice Department's investigation picks up, there's not going to be any question that Donald Trump and his close cronies are going to be under the microscope for having tried to overthrow the election. And Republicans really have to decide, do they want to set themselves up by putting in power in governorships, in Secretary of State spots, in attorneys general spots, people who would try the same thing again in 2024. So that's really what they're facing. And unfortunately, I think Cheney and Hogan are going to be out there pretty much on their own. The piece was sort of a plea, as you noted, that others would join them.
So, Jen, to that point, the remnants of the Republican Party, which is now in the rearview mirror, Yesterday is further indication that I have no life. I happened to watch Donald Trump's performance in front of that crowd in Washington, D.C. And not for the first time, I came to the conclusion that it's not necessarily ideology that has people in rapture to Donald Trump. So my question to you is, in the larger sense, the former Republican Party, if it's not ideology, what enthralls them to the extent that they lack the courage to stand up against someone who is literally trying to overthrow the existing American government?
Well, there are two ways that you can look at this. One is the Lindsey Graham way, which is, I got what I wanted. I used this guy as a vehicle to get conservative court justices, to get tax cuts. And the other is more, I think, applicable to the party at large. And that is, he gives people who are resentful, who are angry about America, people to hate. And those include immigrants. Those include people who are trying to advance civil rights. Those include people who are trying to teach an accurate view of history, the so-called elites, the mainstream media. And by giving people to hate, he pumps them up and he tells them, I'm on your side, keeping them in a constant state of fury and anger. And that is really how he bonds with people. You're exactly right. If he had an ideology at one point, it's completely all over the map at this point. He's certainly not a conservative in any sense of the message. And what was billed as a policy speech yesterday, I don't know. Did you hear any policy in there, Michael? Yes. So I think we know kind of where he's at. And it's also a lesson for the Republicans. If he does run, he is going to spend the entire time talking about 2020. So if that's what they're looking for, they're going to get it. And they, again, have, I think, made a cardinal error in saying, we'll just humor him a little bit more. And by humoring him, they've kept him in the picture and may well wind up with him as their nominee.
Policy wonk Donald Trump did not show up at that speech yesterday, but he did find some time to complain and whine about the grievances against him. Jennifer Rubin, thanks so much. We'll be reading your new column, TheWashingtonPost.com.